All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jinhua Zhao, Professor of Cities and Transportation at MIT. Welcome to the MIT Mobility Forum designed by the MIT Mobility Initiative. We started the MIT Mobility Forum in fall 2020. It was quite a success. We ran 26 sessions in a year. For each one of them, we attract hundreds of people participating. People join us from all over the world and actually contributing to questions and comments. However, about 1 year later, a few of the members emailed me asking, Jinhua, how many women have spoken in your forum? I counted out of the 26 sessions by then, there were 4, right? About 15%. So that question really, startled me a bit. Clearly, I didn't intentionally make so, but also neither did I intentionally to do something to change it, right? So we recognize there's such an imbalance. And since then, we tried to put some effort, do better. The following year, we had 9 women speakers in the forum. But mostly this summer, Hyun-A Park and I had a long conversation. What really can we do to change the picture here, right? So all of that conversation comes this MIT Mobility Forum sub-series, Women Leaders in Transportation. It really aims to celebrate, advance, but most importantly, inspire the contribution of women in today's ever-changing landscape of transportation and mobility. So I'm really grateful to Hyun-A Park, Victoria Sheehan, Laura Chase for making this happen today. Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg, her office just called me about 1 hour ago. There's an emergency meeting called by the White House. She sent her apologies. She really couldn't join today's meeting on that. If we study how young generation can be successful, one key factor is to interact with and be inspired by successful people of the same gender, right? The study actually specifically emphasized the success people of the same gender to inspire. So today, I couldn't have hoped for a better panel to offer such inspiration. Hyun-A Park is the president of Spy Pound Partner and a member at the MIT Corporation. Victoria Sheehan is the executive director of the Transportation Research Board, and Laurie Chase is the CEO and president of ITS America. So thank you again, the panel, for joining us today, share your experiences. So today we have 1 hour. We'll run it in 3 sessions. The first part, I'll invite Hyun-A Park to moderate the session with a question about each of the panelists' personal experience and growth into the leadership in transportation. And second round, I will prompt the panel with a question about what program, policy, or technology can have the biggest impact on transportation, given today's current opportunities and the challenges. And the third round, I'll invite a conversation among the panel, reflect on what you heard from the other panelists. And then lastly, John Monzati will organize the question and answer from the audience so that we can engage the audience on this. We hope that we'll have a multiple round and each round have a shorter but more frequent interaction on this. With that, I will pass the forum to Hyun-A Park to start the first round of conversation. Hyun-A, please.
Thank you, Jinhua. I'm excited to be here today to launch this Women Leaders in Transportation series. So let's get started with round 1 of our remarks. Jinhua and I thought the focus on women leaders is important because at the leadership level, women are still underrepresented across all transportation sectors. We hope that by featuring women like this group at this forum today, it will motivate other women to seek leadership positions and highlight to everyone in our industry why this is so important. So with that context, can Victoria and then Laura share your personal experience growing into leadership in your career and share what were the catalysts that made you into the leader you are today?
Well, I am the first woman to serve as the executive director of the Transportation Research Board. So I really appreciate MIT and this forum embracing this need to showcase women leaders to inspire others to want to step into those roles. My career started at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I'm from Ireland originally, and being from another country, I didn't know who all the players were in the transportation industry. I figured the best way to learn who was to work for a state DOT. And so I spent the first 12 or so years of my career in Massachusetts, and then I became the Commissioner of Transportation in New Hampshire, prior to then assuming this role as Executive Director of TRB. I have been extremely fortunate throughout my career to work for some incredible leaders. I'm a big believer in the right leader at the right time. I've worked for a number of different people who brought different skills to their roles. And so I've certainly tried to emulate and mirror those who I appreciated working for throughout my career. But I think I was just naturally curious about all the various aspects of transportation. I've worked in design and construction, in maintenance and operations. I did project and program planning because I really want to understand how everything fits together, so that as we're making decisions and trying to improve the transportation system for both the users as well as to sustain our economy, I personally want to understand all the nuances, what happens upstream and downstream of the work that I was doing, as well as how we could increase the outcomes. And so I think that definitely has shaped the type of leader that I am, listening to individuals involved in a number of roles, talking to stakeholders who both rely on the transportation system, but also can help us deliver services more effectively to those that use it. And I've worked for some inspirational women over my career, but also I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the men who were quick to recognize my talents, to encourage me to step out beyond what I thought I was capable of doing, and gave me the encouragement that I needed to pursue that next step in my journey.
So yes, and I'll add in. So my career and path, I'd say maybe a little different from Victoria's in some ways. So non-linear. So I came into the work world. I was in politics, and I worked in the telecom industry for some time. And I am a mother of three. I had twins, and then a few years later had a daughter. And after my third child, I was trying to make it all work. I was trying to juggle it all. And I felt like I wasn't doing well at anything. I felt like I was not doing well being a mother. I felt like I was not doing well at work. And I ended up, for personal reasons, because my daughter was not thriving, I ended up staying home. So I took a break from my career for about 5 years when my daughter was very young. And, at the time, I will say it was an easier decision, because when you're, when your infant is not doing great, it's not a hard decision as a mother, I will say, to put your career on hold. But I wasn't thinking about any of the implications or what it might mean for the future at that point. I was fortunate enough to come back into the industry. I came into transportation, right? ITS, which I think is that really interesting mix of transportation and technology. I was able to come back in that industry after a break through a former boss and mentor. And like Victoria, I've worked for a lot of really supportive bosses. I've had some great mentors. I absolutely would not be where I am today without them. And I think for me, two things happened, I'd say, in terms of the question about like what were the catalysts. One catalyst was for me realizing that I had a job, but if I wanted a career and I really wanted to advance, I needed to do some things differently. And I would describe it as I needed to act more like a man, right? I needed to be able to go to the dinners. I needed to be able to travel. I needed to be able to be engaging in a way that was more comprehensive, that I wasn't at the time doing. At the time, I was really, trying to balance all of my family and professional responsibilities. It's not to say you can't have balance, but it's a different kind of balance. So I decided I did want to move forward with my career, and I did dive in, I'd say, a little deeper to be able to make some of those advancements. The other catalyst, I will say, is similar to Victoria, having other people, mentors, bosses, actually ask me questions, notice something in me, see something in me and ask me questions about would I ever want to be a CEO? Would I ever want to lead an organization? And really, instilling their confidence and their advice in me. And the real important piece about that was it was the first time someone had asked me, had seen something in me, and then said, well, if you might want to do that in 5 years, here's what you need to be doing now. And I think that's one of the most important keys for women is, you have to be planning ahead, and you might have to be planning for something that might be outside of your comfort zone. But if you don't, then it's very hard to get there. And I do think that's a conversation that I hope leaders have with their female employees as much as they have it with their male employees about, you have this potential. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to be doing X, Y, Z in the next few years? Because here's a path that you should be thinking about. And if that hadn't happened, I don't know that I, would have gotten there at the timeline that I did, right? Hopefully I would have gotten there anyway, but maybe not in the timeline that I did.
Great, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Victoria. Hyun-A, I mean, you play a dual role today here. You're a co-host, but you're also one of the major women leader of your own right. So can you share a little bit of yourself?
Thanks, Jinhua. So for me, I reflect on my career and think about that, the hard work that I expended in my first job. I actually worked for a state agency that was led by Tunny Lee. Many of you on this forum may remember him. He was a professor when I was a student at MIT. And sometimes I think I worked 80, 90 hours a week. And because I had a quest to get things done. But then I think the other side was kind of having the curiosity to know everything. And that set the stage for my bosses, who really gave me opportunities to grow further because I was working hard and I was curious. And then I would say that just the quest to understand everything was another ingredient. There's a term in Korean called nunchi, and nun means eyes, and it's really the ability to see. And seeing is not just what's visible to one's eyes. And I think that just over the years, the experiences I had kind of grew my strength in my nunchi abilities, and which helped me become a better leader. I also switched from buildings in my first job when I worked for Tunny to transportation to work on the Big Dig. And I would say don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to build knowledge in the industry you're in. And so transportation was a complex topic area, and it took me many years and a lot of frustration, but over time, being patient gave me that. And just my final point is, when I started SpyPalm Partners back in I think it was 2006 with another MIT female alum, Frances Harrison, I reached out to a lot of people to help us build our workload, which, when you first start a business, you're starting from scratch. And I will tell you that it was 100% other women who helped us get started. And the men didn't go out of their way where else the women did. And it just makes me think that we have to lean on our affinities, because those are the groups that will want to stick their necks out and help. So encouraging more of the affinities, groups you're in to grow their strength.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria, Laura, and Hyun-A. So before I start the second round, I want to get some sense of the audience. Who are the audience, right? So the panel can speak more too. So may I invite everybody in the chat to type in your organization, your location, the city or state, and your local time. So I will say MIT, Cambridge, MA. Now it's 12:16 p.m. Right. MIT, Zipcar, San Francisco. Yeah, your organization and the cities. right? Beacon Software, MIT Sloan, Ford, Motor Company, Assembly Venture, City of Cambridge, RTC, Equiticity in Chicago, CTN, Volpe Center, Global Food Banking. Great, yeah, thank you. Hopefully the panel can see the diversity of the audience coming from a variety of organizations joining us today. Also, I want to take time to reinforce the norm of this forum, which is for all the participants, the audience, to contribute at least one idea in the chat. The idea could be a question to the panel or to a comment in the panel, right? You can I encourage people to start to type in your questions, comments along the way in the chat, right? I see a few questions already sending in. You can input them again, so you can flow on top of the chat that we just mentioned. That right? Great. So let's get to the second round. Yeah, I'll start with maybe Victoria again. This question is from your point of view. What's the biggest impact in transportation that we can really contribute given the current opportunities and the challenges? Yeah, I think for all three you coming from represent three very different sectors, right? Research institute, industry alliance, and a consulting industry. So I'd like to hear each of you, what's your aspect on this? Victoria, please.
So I could talk about a number of innovations and technologies, but I suspect that Laura will cover that. So at TRB, one of the things that we're really grappling with is how to bring more of a multidisciplinary approach to the work that we're doing. We have a proud tradition at TRB. We have 177 technical standing committees. We have true subject matter experts serving in those roles who are trying to push things forward and embrace innovation within their technical area of expertise. But to solve some of the transportation challenges that we're facing today, we really have to try and break down some of those silos and work much more collaboratively across our research organization, but also across the transportation community, because at the end of the day, we at TRB are striving to represent that community and meet the needs of all of the practitioners. I was sharing before this meeting that we are looking forward to the TRB annual meeting in January, and we've seen a real uptick in the number of papers that are being submitted, but some of the topics are truly cross-cutting. And so this need to diversify the workforce within the transportation communities, that we're bringing the right skill sets to the table to solve these problems, as well as collaborating with policymakers and decision makers from outside of the transportation sector, so that we can lift some of the barriers that have prevented us from deploying innovations and technologies, but also ensure that other decisions are made in such a way that we can provide efficient and effective transportation solutions. As an example, talking about something like land use planning, if land use planning is occurring without transportation being integrated into those approaches, we downstream as transportation professionals end up trying to provide connections and services that maybe aren't the most efficient and effective because we didn't have a seat at the table from the beginning of that process. And so I think that's what's really exciting about working in transportation at this moment in time. There's a true desire to bring about transformation and move towards more of a system of systems versus our traditional multimodal approaches. And to do that, we have to break down the silos. To accelerate the pace of change, we have to embrace technology, innovation, and research. But to mainstream it at a faster rate than we ever have before, we have to be building the capacity, which means not just talking to those within our sector, but really expanding our reach and enticing others to want to work in the transportation profession.
Well, Victoria, thank you so much about this comment about this multidisciplinary approach, right? For that, maybe let me add a remark. Within MIT, the MIT Mobility Initiative was founded 3 years ago precisely to try to tackle this question here, right? There's a narrow notion of transportation typically sitting in civil engineering and urban planning, but then we broaden it up to say include mechanical engineering, computer science, political scientists, economists. So now actually, for me, even I've been here as a faculty for 10 years, I keep discovering professors actually working on transportation that I didn't know of for all sorts of departments, right? We have 72 professors across 12 different departments all working on this, right? For that, maybe a question to Victor, between the like KRB's Research Institute, academics, industry, government, which area do you think we are making better progress, more progress into this multi-different approach? Versus some sector maybe just much more difficult. The siloness is much more entrenched, right? So what's your observation on this, and how can do even better to encourage multiple area all taking this perspective?
So I want to be clear, we don't want to lose our technical capabilities. We want to have those true subject matter experts continue to challenge the norms within their discipline, because then they can lend those talents and solutions to these broader problems. But I think in transportation, this really comes down to leadership. And I think you're seeing, whether it's at the federal level, at the state level, or at the local level, this desire to collaborate and the expectation that we need to bring together non-traditional stakeholders, bring together more public and private sector voices so that we can not only identify the solutions, but actually deploy them. And so I think that's what's most encouraging to me at the moment, is we've been trying to sort of mainstream this way of doing our work, and we're certainly challenged, especially when it comes to transportation. You think of the number of players, just the owners and operators of these systems and the different governance structures. They're the decision makers when it comes to the investments that we're making, but then all the different types of industries that now need to be tapped to provide the types of solutions to prepare us for the future. There's a lot of private sector partners that don't even understand the role that they could be playing in the transportation space. And those are huge opportunities for those companies and entities. But how do we socialize and educate them on what the needs of the transportation sector are? But I think the exciting thing is the governance is changing. There's this expectation now from elected leaders, from the leaders of these owner-operator agencies to think differently, to come together. I come from the state DOT environment, and within that group, we talk a lot about how we're not your grandfather, your grandmother's state Department of Transportation. They are multimodal agencies these days. They are much more collaborative with all of the different levels of government. And we're really putting the users at the heart of the conversation. And so I'm energized that finally we have the leadership to accelerate the pace of change for everyone.
Nice. Thank you, Victoria. Laura, share with us your experience at ITS America.
Sure. Well, actually, I'm not going to talk about technology specifically, although I certainly believe, of course, that there are many technologies, that can help us as we look to make better transportation options for communities and everybody. So I think, to tag onto what Victoria is saying, the problems, one of the biggest problems we're facing in transportation and the challenges we face is that we can't solve it within our industry, right? Like it's a healthcare issue. It's an economic issue. All of these an energy issue, right? So we're really seeing this confluence of all of these different societal factors that are really tied into transportation as this foundational point of access. And so I actually am going to look at it from the spirit of today and female leaders. I'm going to look at it from the lens of, one of the things I think that it could be is really impactful and that we need to be thinking about today, where we have all this money that we're investing, right, in our systems. But do we actually know how people move? Do we know how women move in particular, and women and those who identify as women? Do we know how they move? Because we have a lot of data talking about, generally what people are taking transit. Are they taking these lines? Where do we need to offer service, right? Where are our busiest corridors? All of that. But if we don't have it broken down by gender, we're actually missing a lot of the story. We know that women move differently. We know that women have different safety considerations. We know that women are the heaviest users of public transit. We know that women in my family and many families make the mobility decisions for their family. But yet our voices are not necessarily included in the decision making, as you mentioned in the beginning, Jinhua, right? We need more representation within decision making in this industry. But also, I think the way that we're planning, building, operating transportation systems doesn't take the differences into account. And an example might be, if I have small children, if I am a caretaker, my mobility options might be more limited than, let's say, a male traveling from his home to his office in a downtown core where the system's kind of set up for you, right? But let's say I've got to also get someone to a doctor's appointment. I've got to pick up a prescription. I might need to have some packages. How am I going to manage those on a city bus? Is the transportation system set up for me? How much time do I lose, right? How much time do I lose in chaining those things together? And then what is that impact to me and my economic opportunity? And then further, what's that impact to me just as a person? Am I spending all of my time doing the basic necessities and have no time left to do things that bring me joy, or to go see friends, or to be able to engage in, in the things that you want to engage in, just for fun? And so I think if we're not looking at how women really move and what they need and why they take certain modes or why they don't, then I think, we risk investing in the same solutions that were not set up for them in the first place and may not be serving them well in the future. So I think making sure that we are actually getting data on how women use transportation, what they need, why, what's important to them, is really critical. Some ideas have come out in the past. I can't take credit, but Sarah Kaufman of the Rudin Center did some studies, and one of her recommendations was, if you're adding a new service, maybe you should be doing a gender audit, right? So a gender audit of that service. I mean, in transportation, you do equity assessments, but those equity assessments don't include gender differences. And one final remark on why this is so important is in Los Angeles, they did some actually gender-based studies on low-income minority communities. They looked specifically at the women because they were looking at interventions. How can we provide better mobility? And one of the things they were thinking about before going in was to offer a free car share. Well, what they found out was many of these women in these minority communities don't have a driver's license. So that solution is not going to help the women. It might help the men, but it's not going to help the women. But if you don't have that data, if you don't actually know, why women might be choosing one service or another, then it's going to be very hard to provide better solutions.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Here, that's a very important distinction here: woman as a leader versus woman as the user, right? Because you're a user yourself, you have a much more sympathy of the reality, right? Therefore, when you're a leader, you are much more recognizant and try to pay attention to that. On that, actually, there's a whole study about the mobility of care as a category of trip purpose that's not defined in the traditional travel survey there, right? But mobility of care is very much disproportionately bared by the women in general, right? So how the transportation will fit in that's really, really nice, yeah. And also you mentioned the gender audit. That's a very interesting thought, yeah. Can you give us a little more detail about how do we go about this?
Well, I mean, the theory being that if you're going, there's different criteria when you're launching a new service, right? You have to understand how it's going to impact the community, how it's going to affect users, who it's going to serve. But typically we don't actually do that through a lens of how is this going to impact people by gender, right? How will this impact women, maybe disproportionately, or those who identify as women, right, versus men? And so that's the idea behind it, right? Is to actually shine a light on saying this is actually an important consideration. And the reason I'll say it's important again is because a few years ago it was actually really instructive when I made a comment somewhere that my experience on the very same, let's say, trip as, let's say, a Black woman or a white male, all three might be different, taking the very same trip. And that's what people have to understand, right? So if you come to it from that lens of understanding that the experience is different, and because the experience is different, people might be making different choices, or might not have the choice that they really want. I think that's where a gender audit can come in and be helpful.
Thank you, Laura. Hyun-A, here, I mean, you have a very interesting career. One part is being a founder, being an entrepreneur, setting your own company, which I'd like you to speak about. But the second one, you also sit on the MIT Corporation. You're the president of MIT alum. You also have a very deep knowledge about the educational side of from the student, younger generation growth side, right? So please share with us your thought about what's most impactful the factor that we should consider.
All right. Well, let me start with just 3 points that I think about as we think about the future and what would be the most impactful. And I'll come back to your questions, Jinhua,
Sure.
on entrepreneurship and education. So I'm super excited about the possibility offered by AI and how fast it may be able to change mobility, both in terms of the how we move and how fast we move and how reliably we move, but also about how efficiently we deliver it through our agencies. But before we focus too much attention, to me, the biggest problem area is how we fund transportation. And, I look at the situation we're in Boston, where I think whenever I say I work in transportation, the first thing out of anyone's mouth in the local area is about the MBTA and how broken they are. But to me, this is due to underinvestment over a very long period. We didn't tackle the investment decision, and that really is what we're suffering right now. And if we don't figure out how to better set up a sustainable funding infrastructure for our transportation infrastructure, we're not going to get any further in improving it. But then finally, for the area that I personally find the most fascinating and an area that I think is underlooked at in our industry is the human workforce side of transportation. I mean, I think people are having more awareness of it recently due to staffing shortages everywhere, but really, I do think that the science of how people work, the science of leadership, these are important topics that actually makes a big difference in the results we get. Being a consultant since the early 90s, I can see that when you have good leadership, good culture in organizations, the amount of difference that makes in the results may be more than a lot of the technical decisions that are being made, and that we need to pay more attention to that. On the entrepreneurship side, I mean, I'd love to see more and more women starting companies, growing. If you look at on the private sector and you look at the large transportation companies and you look at the board of directors, guess what you see? Predominantly white men. And the only way we're going to change that is to have more and more women start companies, support each other, and that I mean, that's, I think, the best way to move forward. And then on the education front, I love that there's more attention. I know at MIT transportation, what Jinhua is doing with the mobility initiative is becoming much more prominent in the kind of the focus area of MIT and its leadership, because it's so strongly tied to climate change. And at MIT, our new president, Sally Kornbluth, climate is her #1 priority. So I definitely think that we need to get more students interested in the topic. I think that's across the board everywhere. How do we take the interest young children have in transportation and convert that to future workers in our system? We clearly have not done a very good job of that in the recent past.
Great, thank you, Hyun-A. Before I get to the third round, I would encourage the audience, please type in your questions or comments, right? I hope really everyone can contribute one idea as part of the 1 hour session there, right? Just the last bit on the MIT, I actually checked the statistics in terms of the student body. MIT achieved the gender balance, half-half, right? But at the faculty level, only 21% of faculty is female here, right? So that's still a long way to go for that, right? So let's get to the third round, which I'll invite maybe start from Laura and then Hyun-A and Victoria to now you hear what the other panels have been thinking, right? How do you reflect on the other people's remark and add your further thoughts in that? Laura, yes.
Well, let me reflect on, some of Victoria's comments first about this interdisciplinary focus that we need. And what I will say, and I saw one of those, I was scanning the chat. I saw one of the comments in the chat kind of asking how are females good at that? And I'm going to steal a line from another female leader who I admire, who said this: women's superpowers are bringing everyone together without ego, collaboration without ego. And I think that's really true. And that's not to say there aren't men who can do that, but women excel at that. And actually, if you look at, and I can't remember now if it was a Harvard Business School, a Harvard Law Review, one of the published documents a year or two ago about top qualities that good leaders have. Overwhelmingly, women have more of those leadership qualities, right? When you're talking about the ability to build relationships, the ability to gain consensus, the ability to, inspire, all of these different qualities that I think are absolutely necessary at the moment that we're in, because none of us can do this on our own. No sector, no industry can do it on their own. We really need that bridge building, that interdisciplinary focus, and we need to come together. And I think female leaders really have a lot of those qualities that can help us be successful. I will also say there has been a lot of research done that shows that, women have very good communication skills typically, right? That's typically a skill that women possess, and men, as just as we can learn from men and learn skills from men that are helpful in the business world, they can learn from women. And that's one of the areas where I think, we can actually be helping each other, right, with these communication skills. Being able to talk about particularly transportation and definitely ITS to people outside the sector, you need very good communication skills, because it's a very esoteric field, and you need to be able to, bring people in a way that is understandable. And so I think that those are areas where I think we can be, learning from each other and helping each other.
Great, thank you, Laura. Hyun-A?
So I'd like to hear from both of you about how your organizations are going to tackle this breaking down of the silos, because I know that, both of you have committee structures that come from historical factors and have their own type of silos. And while attempts at trying to break down are always there, progress, I think, is slow on that front. So I'd be curious to hear about that.
Yeah, Victoria, do you want to start?
So it is something that we're really grappling with at TRB. Like I said, we are very proud of the tradition that we do have of bringing together, subject matter experts around a particular topic so that they can push their area of transportation forward. But to solve today's challenges, we have to find new ways to work together. And so one of the things that we're doing periodically, our executive committee of TRB publishes a document called Critical Issues in Transportation. Over the past year, we've been working on a new edition of that document that will come out at the end of this year in preparation for our annual meeting. And we're really hoping that our committees, as well as those who are helping select problem statements for the cooperative research that we do, will be able to coalesce around those critical issues. And one of the suggestions that we have is to incorporate those issues into all of our conferences and convenings. I was at an event last week. It was the World Road Congress. And so that brought together practitioners from, I think it was close to 50 countries were represented. And we were talking about, on topics like equity or women and gender issues in transportation, we do have these affinity groups who've come together. There has been a tremendous amount of research done. We have solutions to make our systems more equitable and accessible to all. But until we expose more practitioners to those principles and mainstream them, we're not going to see the results that we're looking for. And unfortunately, even the practical piece, for people to get support from their supervisors and management to attend events and learn about new areas of transportation, that can be challenging. So if we can incorporate these themes into the more technical events that we would offer for those various groups, then hopefully we can expose more people to the issues. Previously, I think we'd jumped to, you do an event around that topic, but then you do tend to attract the individuals who already have a passion for that subject matter area. So we're talking about just how do we embed some of these really important principles and concepts in what we do. But I do want to say, everything that both Laura and Hyun-A said really resonates with me. How do we provide a transportation system that works for everybody if we don't have a workforce that reflects all the people that we're serving? And workforce is a critical issue for every employer right now. Everyone is struggling to find talent. And we in transportation are probably struggling more than some other sectors because we have to attract some of these non-traditional workers into our space. But this is our moment to close some of these gender gaps, to address equity, because we can be intentional about how we go about doing this work. And at the end of the day, I think women still earn approximately 37% less than their male counterparts. There's a lot of underemployment when it comes to women in transportation. And that's because of all the things Laura described, the fact that women still are predominantly the caregivers, whether it's for children or for elderly family members, that they aren't just going to and from work, they're making multiple trips in a day. That takes time, depending on the mode that they're using, and therefore they can't seek advancement and can't accept some of the employment opportunities that would help them get ahead and help them sustain their families. And so it does come back to the workforce piece and good leadership. For us to have this new approach to our work, we need fresh faces and new voices to inform how we're doing the work. And I would love to dig into AI, but I'll hold my thoughts on that item for a little while longer.
Great, thanks, Tara. Laura, do you want to add some remarks to Hyun-A's question?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add that, it is a work in progress. I would say, it is a challenge to break down some of those silos and get some of that, interdisciplinary work. I think, just from organization to organization, actually Victoria and I, TRB and ITIS America, we have always worked well together, but we've been trying in the past couple of years to be, I'd say, integrating our work more. And by that, I mean, TRB is coming out with a lot of important and relevant research. How do we take that and then build on that, right, in our work, so that we're actually building on work that's been done and not, starting things over, starting from scratch. And so we're really trying with our industry partners at different organizations, we're really trying to figure out how can we get economies of scale by leveraging the work of others, and be able to have a less siloed approach within our industry to help all of our members, like all the practitioners and technology developers out there. And that is, that's a change, and it definitely takes time, and it takes, I'd say it's an iterative process, but we're all committed to it, and I hope that we're starting to make some progress, and we'll make some more progress over the coming, years, year or two.
Nice, yeah. Victoria, I do want to hear your view about AI and how to play. Before I give the phone to Zhao for the question from the audience. Yeah, I want to add that MIT just recently called for many professors to write like very short opinion papers about this large language model, right? So the cutting from edge of the AI. And if you notice, several of the female professors, their angle approach is really fascinating. For one of them, professor talk about how AI will change the intimacy between humans. How do we change the human relationship, right? This type of perspective, I think that is really particularly powerful to see that. But Victoria, share with us your thought on this.
So with any technology, I think the promise of what it can do for us will only be fully realized if we talk about how it is going to impact people and their use of in this case, our transportation systems. I think transportation in particular, we have been deploying technology. We've become more and more data rich and information poor. So the ability to use AI tools to not only process data, but to refine all of our algorithms so we can most efficiently utilize the systems that we have today, whether it's more dynamic traffic management, it's AI informing the technologies that are being deployed for connected and automated vehicles, sustainable transportation. the potential benefits are extraordinary, but public acceptance, when we talk about certain solutions, will only come if we have both talked to people about, I think Laura said it, we don't know how women are traveling today. We don't know how people really want to travel. So that's the other thing, is until we understand what their needs are going forward, and then understand how technology can meet that need and get their buy-in, and then also have a lot of transparency around the capability of technology, where we can use AI and these solutions to come up with really innovative approaches, but we've got to be solving the right problems, and we have to have the public acceptance to make sure they actually use the technology.
Great, thank you. So I'll give the phone to Zhao.
Thank you so much. Lots and lots of really interesting commentary in the chat. So I encourage everyone all of you to have a look at that. I want to actually reflect with two comments that reflect a little bit on the comments that we're seeing in the chat. So there was a set of commentary sort of about how far we have come and yet how much further we have to go. And I just want to reflect that from my own personal experience, working, heading mobility at the World Economic Forum, say 20 years ago. I had to kind of look around to find women like Robin Chase, who, by the way, is among us today on this call. So women who went out there and founded companies and really moved the needle in the transportation space. I will say it is far less challenging today. And I'm excited, just looking forward to our Vision Day for the MIT Mobility Initiative, which is where we convene a lot of our community. We have women, in addition to Laura, of course, who's joining us. I mean, we have women like Laura Major, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Motional. We have Raquel Urtasun, who founded an autonomous trucking company. Christina Lampe-Honorard, who founded Boston Power, a leader in battery technology. Camille Terry, who founded Charger Help, is running that company. So we have amazing women today in transportation. So yes, we have made progress. And yet, in 2014, Mary Barra became the first woman to lead a major global automaker at General Motors. And effectively, she is still the only female CEO of a major automobile manufacturer. The most recent Fortune 500 list that came out here in the United States, it made headlines because we just passed 10% of the CEOs of our Fortune 500 companies here in the United States are now women. The precise figure is 10.4%. So yes, that's impressive, but is it really when women compose 50% of the population? So I think there's comments in the chat that reflect this. We have made progress with women leadership in transportation, and yet we have a long way to go. The second comment that I want to make is actually much more reflected to the men in the audience, and that is to consider what Hyun-A said about this concept of Nucci. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but effectively to think about empathy. And so here I just want to reflect on a conversation that I had recently with my wife, who spent a very large part of her career as an executive. And we were reflecting on a comment that basically reads like this. And I don't even know who said this, but the comment reads something like, men are hired or promoted for what they will do. Women are hired or promoted for what they have done. And I personally talked to my wife about that, and we had a very long conversation about this. And I don't know if this comment resonates with any of the women on the panel, but I would ask that all of the men who are joining us today have these types of conversations with the women in their lives who are, in the workforce and out there doing things. So I think that empathy angle is very, very important. And I think Laura spoke to that extremely well, when we consider how different that trip experience is for different types of people. So just to reflect a little bit on one of the comments to open. So there was two comments, one from Farah Khan, who is in Pakistan, and she was asking about how can women find role models in transportation? And a similar question from Tiffany Lim, which is, I wonder if you have any tips to share about identifying potential mentors. So could I turn that back to the panel, please? Reflections on role models and mentors that have helped you in your career. Maybe Laura, we start with you.
Sure. I would say, you know, my first advice is if there is a female leader that you either know, have been introduced to, or seen, don't be afraid to reach out. I've actually had young women reach out to me and ask if, you know, could I, you know, be an informal mentor, or, you know, just give them some advice or support. So I would say in terms of how to find them, don't be afraid to ask. That would be my first comment. And then I think, you know, I think the other thing is, it is important. So I think it's critically important, of course, to have, if you're a female, to have female mentors, right? We've talked about that. You know, you need to see it to be it. It's very important to have that. But I also think, like, if you actually look at where the power is held right now, it's held with the men. So I actually think it's actually important that women also seek out male mentors who are in those power circles, who do have those executive roles, who have the networks that you need to break in. And so I would say, don't limit yourself just to same-sex mentors. Make sure that you're casting a wide network, because from my own experience, it was a male mentor who actually kind of brought me into the circles I needed to be in, put me at the tables I needed to be in. And, you know, that was a function of his access. And he, you know, helped bring me into those environments. And so I think that's really important.
Excellent. Victoria?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Laura said. And it's not just about finding mentors, it's also about finding sponsors. You know, you shared the quote about, you know, how men are recognized essentially for their potential, whereas women have to have done certain things. If you have a sponsor, somebody who behind closed doors, when you're not even in the room, is, you know, recommending you for a position, talking about what you've accomplished, what they see in you, both men and women, that opens a lot of doors for you. And certainly I've experienced that in my career. Yes, I was encouraged by mentors to put myself forward for opportunities, but many times somebody came to me and said, you know, we were talking about who we need to lead this initiative, and your name came up. And it was those people who really helped me both recognize my own potential, but ensure that those doors were open for me. So I think it's both. It's seeking out the mentors who can help and guide you, but then finding those folks who are also going to be your advocate and champion and argue for you.
I'll jump in.
Hyun-A, just before you jump in, I also just want to give a heads up. If Robin Chase is still with us, I would invite you as well, just to jump in with any thoughts that you might have. But over to you, Hyun-A.
Yeah. So to me, I think I jump to, how do we operationalize? I don't think anyone would say disagree with mentorship. You know, it's brought up a lot, but how many of us actually do mentor and connect with somebody who would like that mentorship? And I know so many women who I think would spend that time if the mechanism was delivered to them, but they don't know how to seek that out. And it makes me think about when I was on the Technical Activities Council of TRB, we did a matchmaking, I think it was called speed dating for chairs, to operationalize that cross-cutting connection. And we had to get rid of the speed dating name because it showed up on somebody's calendar, and they said that they thought people, they were going to TRB to go dating, you know, on a speed dating. So, but to, you know, for each of us in the organizations we're in, actually to set up a matchmaking session between mentors and mentees and make the connections and do it so that people can find each other, because, you know, mentorship is about chemistry between the two people. So even for you, Jinhua, you could have alumni come in and connect with your students in that way. TRB would be a fantastic forum because you touch so many people, right? So same with you, Laura. So that's what I suggest.
Super. Robin, are you with us by any chance?
She's not.
She's off. Okay, great. So with just 2 minutes left, this is almost an impossible question. There actually really was a strong interest in AI. And so Kathy Wu was asking about that as well from MIT. Any maybe further last comments about the role that AI could help in transportation in general, or specifically with respect to women leadership in transportation?
You know, for me, I did talk to a state DOT CEO about pushing forward an initiative and talk to some of their people. And there is some hesitancy because of how fast it's moving and how hard it is in the large transportation agencies to change once you implement something. And it makes me think, you know, can we think of a better way to connect university efforts with the agency delivery, and do those kinds of mechanisms exist to rather than the consultant model of delivery, which is what typically happens.
I would just add on to something that was touched on before, which is that we are in this moment and going to continue to have just these almost unfathomable amounts of data that we have to process, and really and truly it's not something that a human can actually do in any kind of time frame that is reasonable. So how do we actually put AI tools in the hands of practitioners and have them figure out what is going to help them do their jobs, right? How is it going to enable them and add to what they have to do so that we can actually be more efficient, be smarter, and let AI do that piece of the work, right? That is just too much for humans to process. I agree, we need trust, we need ethics, we need guidelines. I agree, AI, some AI has bias. So there are definitely considerations that we have to take into account, but I do think there's a role, and it's going to be an increasing role, where I think that the capabilities of AI, if deployed, in a reasonable, ethical way, can actually help us all advance the transportation industry a little better for what we have to deliver on.
Victoria, last word.
Yeah, there's so many potential applications of AI. Even at TRB, we're talking about how we could curate our content in a more effective way. We're a victim of our own success because of the contributions of our volunteers. We've done so much research over the years, and some of the research itself is pretty foundational and still very much relevant, even though it might have been released, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And then we've done a deeper dive, and we've done research and enhanced the practice in certain areas. And so if you're a consumer of our research wanting to adopt those best practices, how do I know what's still relevant? How do I know what is a advancement in the practice without having to read all of the reports and all of the content? So AI to help us curate that content and repackage it so that it's more accessible to consumers, that practitioners can leverage it more effectively. Those are some of the real tactical things. To Laura's point, that would help us all do our jobs much better and ensure that research is being brought to bear in everyday decision-making with all of the stakeholders that we partner with. I get back to, we have so much data, and if we're just focused on analyzing that data and making decisions, we cannot go too far down a path. Like I said, using AI for traffic management without also talking to people about how they want to travel. We can do all this analysis on existing data of how our systems are being utilized at this moment or have been utilized in the past. But what do the consumers actually want to do in the future? The tools can certainly help us build those more efficient, effective solutions, but we can't just, because we have the capability now, focus on the existing data sets that are available to us without thinking about those gaps. And the biggest gap, I think, is around what users want from the transportation system as opposed to what they've settled for because of the system that is available to us today.
Great. Yes, to connect the discussion on data and the woman leadership. There's a book, Data Feminism, written by my colleague Catherine Ignatius, very much speaks to that point. We recommend. So I'm so sorry it's 1 o'clock, more than 1 o'clock. I have to disrupt such an interesting conversation. So Victoria, Laura, and Hyun-A, I'm grateful for delivering the inaugural session of Women Leadership in Transportation so elegantly. Everybody, please join me. Thank the panel for this.